to Inspiring Nimbleness. Step inside and join our conversation about how to create innovation in the nonprofit world. Join me, Brent Neilsen, and my co-host Ron Hayes as we explore the latest trends and rhythms in the social sector. Join us today as we look at VUCA, what it is, and how it affects all of us. VUCA is a term coined by strategists in the mid-90s. It was originally created to define how the state of a conflict had changed from the Cold War years. A VUCA world is characterized by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, in contrast to the predictable, obvious, simple, clear environment of the Cold War. In just a moment, we will dive into each of these terms. The leadership challenges of VUCA are exposed when all four of these overlap. A volatile environment is one with low resistance to change. The waves of change may get bigger as well as coming closer together. An uncertain environment is one with less clarity about the future. Projections and predictions are forced into ranges rather than specifics. Complexity may be the simplest idea to understand. A complex environment is one complicated by many different decision factors. Ambiguity presents us with challenges because as we have worked so hard to understand the situation, we are now confronted with the recognition that there is no right answer. Perhaps the most important thing to recognize about VUCA is it is not something we can combat. It is the state of today's environment. The leaders and organizations who survive and thrive will be the ones who adapt.
I think that probably 2008 was really a VUCA moment, 2008, 2009, when we hit the Great Recession. I was the director of Marion Park Food Share, and hunger in and of itself is a very complex problem. You've got lots of factors that are there, the volatility of the market taking a dive, and also of needing more resources than what we had. I remember being out in the warehouse one day, and a guy by the name of Jack Thornton came in and says, "Ron, what are we going to do if we run out of food? What are we going to do help people with?" And he told me a story then about his family being in the Philippines in a concentration camp during World War II. And he said they only had rice, and then the Red Cross brought in some vitamins, and he just a little bit of rice. And had they not had the vitamins with that rice, he says, I don't think they would have survived. He says, do you think it's going to get so bad in this recession that all we're going to be able to do is some rice? Maybe we ought to get some vitamins. Mm-hmm. And then he walks off and leaves me looking at an empty warehouse. And that was VUCA.
Yeah.
That was a VUCA moment. Probably the most glaring example of VUCA. The volatility, the uncertainty, the complexity, the ambiguity of what we're facing. It was all in that one instance where I felt VUCA crashing in on me.
So one of the things that people will talk about with VUCA is that when you get in those moments, you have to focus more on the people than on the tangible details. Was that something that you felt or that you changed, or?
I don't think you can focus just on the people myself personally. I think the complexities require you to focus on a whole host of things, of economy, of scale, of strategy, a variety of different types of things that goes beyond just the people and the personal thing. You have that. That's what complicates it, I guess, more than anything. It mandates that you'd have to do something. But at the same time, there's a lot of factors that are coming from a variety of different types of angles that you have to look at besides just the people.
So how did you navigate forward? How did your leadership change after that experience?
I think the change was in the making of a commitment. I gathered my staff together and I brought in some experts for nutrition and from the Oregon State. Uh, and anyway, they came in and were meeting with us, and I said, okay, our challenge is this:
Mhm.
if we make a commitment, to never run out of food, what is that commitment to? Is it rice and vitamins, or do we commit to other things as well?
Mhm.
And that group took and wrestled with that, and we developed 16 core foods that if we had those 16 core foods, we would meet the minimum daily requirements for nutritional needs for those people that we were serving. And that became the core foods project that we had at the food share as a result of that. And that was how we approached it.
So that became the vision and the clarity of, the of understanding what was important. Um, did you have examples of agility or nimbleness that had to come out of that?
Yeah, we actually took and got a list of 16 core foods. And I had this list on a piece of paper from this group. And I turned it to our chief of operations and I says, make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so they worked with that, and they got everything together, and they reorganized our entire inventory process, our entire warehouse to be centered around those 16 core foods. So it transformed our operation. And we even had people telling us we were foolish and doing this, and they were the experts in the hunger world, and just said, well, we're going to do it anyway because it's what we have to do. And so yeah, there was a lot of nimbleness in respect of making changes, and we did it quickly.
Yeah.
Within a month, we had changed our entire operation around the concept of these 16 food groups that we wanted to make sure we had.
So what understandings did you gain about, that's when people talk about balancing the uncertain environment, they try to understand their situation at a deeper level. Um, was that part of the 16 core foods, or was there something else that you did to
Well,
understand your?
we knew the usage of the food. We knew all the things that were going to be there, so we could project volumes and things like that. But when you start talking about a shelf-stable protein, for example,
Mhm.
you have a variety of different things that can fill that niche.
Yeah.
And so we worked with expertise in the fields of nutrition and built it.
Yeah. So for a leader who is sitting at wit's end and in their organization today, and they're just foundering, what would your advice be on how they can move towards, you had some great conversations with your people, and you were prescient in knowing to have those conversations. If for someone who doesn't have a clue what the next step is, what are the first three things you would suggest they should do?
Well, first of all, I get people around you that you can draw upon that have answers, that know the sciences and the facts and the things like that. Make sure you have good data. The next thing I would say is that you don't have fear. You have to address the challenges that come with the circumstances, and you can't address it with fear. And then you got to be, the third thing is willing to change. And I think those three things together allowed us to be successful. One, we had the expertise and the data, we gathered upon that. Two, we knew we had to act. And three, we had to do it without fear.
Okay, so not having fear and embracing change are two huge comments. those,
Yeah.
those are geologic changes for some people.
Yeah.
Um,
I think probably being a paramedic helped me. I
Yeah.
went into volatile situations all the time to help people and work on saving their life and saving the situation in a whole host of unpredictable environments.
Yeah.
And so this was the same approach. You just had to launch in. I didn't have a choice as a paramedic to leave the scene. So
Mhm.
it's not for me.
Right.
Well, I didn't have a choice also to leave the food share and say this is not for me. I had to address it because if I didn't address it,
Hmm.
people would be hungry. People would starve,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
that's not an acceptable outcome.
Yeah.
So that's why I was afraid. I was afraid mostly of failure
Hmm.
and failing to adequately provide. But that's also the driver behind me, also that kept me driven to make sure that came up with answers.
Huh. Yeah, that's awesome. But,
But that was a VUCA world like none other than I've seen others as well, but just that was one that really stands out in my mind as a VUCA world.
so if you look back on that experience, are there things you would have done differently?
That's a hard one. Uh, Possibly I didn't analyze it that much
Yeah.
because it worked. It was working. What we did do was working, and it helped us get through that. And I just sort of had to hold on to that. That yes, I may have done some things better, but I don't know what they are
Hmm.
because we were successful in making the switch and the change. Um, if I look back, anything I probably should have changed how we did things before we even got into the disaster kind of setting.
Yeah.
I should have made I should have made those nutritional types of changes way early
Hmm.
because it was a healthy thing to do. But the circumstances just that were there just drove me to move forward. But I could have made those changes prior to it if I'd recognized that I needed to.
Well, and I guess I'd like to echo your last comment because I think one of the biggest obstacles I see as people try to navigate VUCA environments is they overanalyze. They spend so much time trying to find the right answer, and you need to go from the gut. You you
Yeah.
need to trust yourself, and you need to say, okay, this feels like the right direction, and even if it's not, I can correct down the road. Because if you sit there trying to find the right answer, times will overtake you. You're not going to get there.
Interestingly, uh, as we moved ahead, one of the things that helped us move ahead was we developed a strategy for each core food group.
Hmm.
There were different strategies for different core food groups
Yeah.
based on what they were. And so we actually developed an individualized strategies for each of those arenas. And I think that probably set me off then to really analyzing nonprofit resource development from the
Hmm.
perspective of the different kinds of resources that you go after and how you might do that. That's probably a whole nother topic
Yeah.
for us to talk about is the diversification of revenues or
Absolutely.
resources.
Yeah.
That's critical in a VUCA world.
Hmm. The other one that maybe we reserve for another time, but I think also is worth talking about. Former executive director to executive director. There's a huge complicator in all of these things that's known as a board of directors, and I think being a leader who is willing to put themselves out there and go from the gut and lead and take risks is complicated by boards who typically are very risk averse. Um, and I think it's important to think about how, as executive directors, do we set the stage with our boards so that so that that risk aversion doesn't end up being a constraint that kills the organization.
Well, the risk that we faced uh, was that people would go hungry.
Yeah.
And it's not a hard one to convey to a board that we need to do it, because you're just being honest and transparent with what you're doing
Hmm.
and why you need to do it, without mincing any words,
Yeah.
uh, because you're committed to the people you're serving,
Hmm.
and you're committed to your community,
Yeah.
and you're committed externally. And I think the board that I had was a good board, but they too were drawn into it with good communication, that the the choices were very apparent because of the issues that we're facing.
Yeah.
And I think that comes with clarity. As you have clarity, that's one of the things with complexity is you want to have clarity.
Hmm.
Um, you want to really have a place to move ahead so that you're not ambiguous.
Hmm.
You're dealing with that ambiguity and the nimbleness that you're developing to address those things that bring on a VUCA world.
Yeah.
And from a board's perspective, there was nothing ambiguous at all about what we needed to do.
Yeah.
There was very good clarity provided with what we needed to do.
Yeah.
And
Survival is not ambiguous.
no, it's not ambiguous. And, and I wasn't worried about my survival.
Yeah.
I was worried about my neighbors and
Hmm.
my friends.
Yeah.
And I guess that's almost as worse than worrying about yourself.
Hmm. Yeah. Awesome. Um, so any last thoughts on, because there people who will watch this will likely be in a point of struggle, in a point of trying to figure out how to navigate. um I'm always hesitant to put myself in the spot of being an elder offering wisdom. But I guess from my perspective, the thing I would suggest to people is trust yourself. Like you said, know your non-negotiables, know what your number one hill to die on is, and trust the people you're working with, and don't quit.
I think that the problem that we were facing, one of the biggest things was the complexity of the problem. The C in the VUCA was really
Yeah.
big. I think people talk about having clarity, and I think the biggest approach that we took
Hmm.
was organizing the complexity.
Yeah.
We organized around that complexity, and that helped us through it. It was more, as you get clarity, people tell you to get clarity with complexity. I think you need to organize complexity so
Hmm.
that you get that clarity.
Yeah. And that's a great point. And choose what are the biggest rocks. um yeah.
Yeah, and don't overcomplicate it
Hmm.
yourself. You know, you can add to that complexity by what you yourself add
you know
to it. Keep,
Complexity is
keep
simple.
yeah, yeah, keep your response down to what it needs to be minimally sufficient and minimally adequate to assure success, and then move above that.
Yeah. Awesome. Good ideas. And I think that really helps set a foundation for how an organization should approach some of these thoughts. So
This particular instance also organized my thoughts for further on down the road, particularly for executive directors,
yeah.
is the organization of resources,
Yep.
and being able to fully grasp and understand the access to resources and how to facilitate that.
Yep.
Uh, just like we had individuals for green vegetables versus non-green vegetables, which are two of our core foods.
Hmm.
The same thing would be with, as you organize your resources for organizations that weren't food related, but
Yeah.
also had the same aspects of complexity.
So one of the things I'm going to do again is I'm going to flash Emerald Flash's website along the bottom, just because for folks watching this, VUCA is one of our core competencies. One of the core things we focus on is helping organizations, helping nonprofits survive in a VUCA world. And so certainly I would encourage anyone who's seeing this to reach out to us and if they have questions, if they have ideas, or just if they want to subscribe and see more of what we have to offer.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Talk to you soon.
Yep. Thank you for joining us on Inspiring Nimbleness. Join us next time as we explore leadership, VUCA, and how it impacts all of us as we try to continue to inspire greatness.